I don't even know why I'm still writing. There's no one left to read this. No one to argue with me about dates, or laugh at my handwriting, or question my sanity when I tell them the dead can speak, if whispering counts as speech. Maybe it's just for me. Maybe it's just so I don't forget that I was here, that I existed, that my name meant something once before the rot and the silence swallowed everything. It's been, God, I've stopped counting. Days? Weeks? The calendar on the wall still says March, but the pages after that are untouched, like they're mocking me with a life that never happened. Outside, the streets are still, empty in that suffocating way where even the wind seems too afraid to pass through. Buildings lean on one another like drunks, shattered glass glittering like teeth on the sidewalks. And in between the cracks, in every alley, every ruined store, every half-burnt house, there are the husks. The zombies don't move much anymore. That's the strangest part. They shuffle, yes, but not like they did in the beginning. Back then it was chaos, screaming, sprinting for your life while they flooded every block like a tide of pale bodies. Now they just linger, heads twitching, skin gray and split like paper left out in the rain. Some stand in circles, swaying, mouths hanging open like they're waiting for something. Others collapse where they stand, arms folded against their sides, eyes glassy and sunken deep. But at night, that's when they change. That's when they whisper my name. At first, I thought it was the wind, dragging my memory into cruel shapes. But then I heard it again. A hiss. A syllable. Daniel. My name. Not shouted. Not groaned. Whispered. Do you know what it feels like to hear your own name curl out of a throat that hasn't breathed in months? I barricade the door tighter every evening, pushing the shelves against it, stuffing the cracks with rags so I don't have to see the shapes outside. But the whispers slip through anyway. Daniel. Daniel. A dozen voices, sometimes more. The longer I stay awake, the more I think I hear words stitched around it, broken, scattered phrases I can't quite catch. Sometimes it sounds like begging. Sometimes like laughter. I keep wondering if I'm the only one left because I was supposed to hear it. Maybe the infection burned differently in me. Maybe the disease never touched me at all, but left me behind as bait. I don't know anymore. Food's running low. I've been rationing stale crackers and a half bag of rice for what feels like forever. Water's worse. The bottles are nearly gone, and I don't trust the taps. The last time I tried, it came out brown, thick, smelling like copper and rot. I'll have to venture out soon. I keep telling myself I will. Tomorrow, maybe. Tomorrow I'll gather my courage, open the door, and step out into that ruined city. But tonight, like every night, I sit here listening. Listening to the voices that should not exist. Listening to the dead croak my name as if they remember me. As if they're waiting. And the part that scares me most, the part one can't stop thinking about, is this: every night the whispers sound closer. I told myself last night that I'd go out today. I barely slept, of course. The whispers pressed against the edges of my dreams, curling my own name into shapes that slid down my spine like cold fingers. But when the gray morning came, when the sun climbed weakly over the rooftops, I knew I had no choice. The last bottle of water sat half empty, and the rice was more dust than grain. If I stayed another day, I'd just be writing an obituary for myself. So I tore down the barricade. Every movement felt like a crime. Each thud of wood against the floor sounded too loud, too final. I stacked the shelves aside and unlatched the lock with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. For a long time I just stood there, palm on the knob, listening. The world outside was quiet, but not empty. That's the worst kind of silence, the one that has weight. I opened the door. The air hit me first, damp and stale, laced with the faint odor of mildew and something metallic underneath, like rust or blood. The hallway stretched long and hollow. Paint curled on the walls, chunks of ceiling scattered across the floor. I stepped carefully, trying to keep my boots from crunching too loudly. It felt like being inside a mouth that could close at any second. When I reached the street, the city greeted me like a corpse left in the sun. Cars were still abandoned at odd angles, doors hanging open as though their owners had leapt out mid-drive. Windows were broken, their jagged edges glinting like 1,000 eyes. The sky hung heavy, a flat gray sheet pressing down on everything. And the zombies, God, the zombies. They didn't swarm like before. No, they just stood. Dozens of them, scattered across the cracked pavement. Some leaned against lampposts, others slumped on car hoods. A few swayed side to side, their eyes unfocused, their mouths hanging slack. None of them rushed me. None of them even twitched when I stepped out into the open. But I swear they knew I was there. Their heads tilted slowly, just enough to let me know I wasn't unseen. Like flowers bending toward sunlight, only I was no sun. I gripped the pipe I'd brought with me, heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. Then I forced myself forward. One foot, then the other. Don't run. Don't panic. The grocery store on the corner was my destination. I'd scouted it 100 times from my window but never dared enter. Its glass doors were cracked but not shattered, the faded open sign swinging in the occasional gust. The shelves inside looked stripped bare from what I could see, but there had to be something. There had to. I pushed the door open. It gave a soft creak, like a voice trying to warn me. Inside smelled of mold and rot. Fluorescent lights still buzzed weakly overhead, though half were dead, leaving long shadows across the aisles. My boots echoed as I stepped through. Most of the shelves were indeed empty, metal stripped clean by desperate hands months ago. But further back, past the rows of barren racks, I spotted a few forgotten treasures. Canned beans, a dented box of cereal, 2 bottles of stale water. I stuffed them into my backpack with trembling hands, fighting the urge to cry with relief. Then just as I zipped it shut, I heard it. Daniel. Not from outside. Not muffled by distance. From inside the store. I froze. My lungs forgot how to work. Slowly, I turned my head toward the sound. In the far corner of the store, past the toppled checkout lanes, stood a shadow. At first, I thought it was just another body leaning against the wall. But then it straightened. Its face, half gone, skin sloughing like wet paper, twitched as it moved its lips. Daniel. Soft. Broken. Like it was learning the shape of my name for the first time. I ran. I don't even remember my feet moving, but the next thing I knew, I was back on the street, clutching my pack to my chest like it was a child. The dead outside didn't chase me, didn't even raise their arms. They just turned their heads in unison, watching me sprint past. By the time I slammed my door shut. Again, barricades piled back into place, I was sobbing. The food and water felt like ashes in my hands. My name still echoed in my ears. I don't know what's worse anymore, the thought that I'm losing my mind, or the thought that I'm not. They said a sentence tonight. I used to think a sentence was something you read in a book, complete, finished, tidy. Tonight I learned a sentence can be a trap. It started as every night does now. The city folding into twilight, the rattle of shutters, the first thin chorus of voices unspooling from alleys like thread. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp dimmed, and the cans lined up like small, useless trophies. I tried to read a page from an old paperback someone had left on a bench months ago. I wanted something ordinary, plot, punctuation, a place where words ended and the next one began. But the letters swam. My eyes kept drifting to the window where the night kept arranging itself into the silhouettes I'd come to know too well. At some point, the whispering changed its shape. It stopped being a scattering of syllables and tightened into something cleaved and whole. I heard one voice, near and steady, shape a string of words the way a bell shapes a sound into glass. Come to us. It wasn't a surging chorus, not the da and I, L rhythm that had plagued me. This was a direct address, the glossy edge of a sentence pointing at me. 3 words. Simple. No adjectives, no flourish. It landed on the air like a stone and made ripples through the room. For a dizzy second I thought it had come from my own mouth. I had been humming a song my mother used to sing, the lines slack on my lips, and then the voice finished for me. Come to us. It was my voice, and it wasn't. It held the lilt of a dozen voices braided into one. Not a request. Not a threat. An invitation that smelled faintly of incense and bleach. I got up without thinking. Habit, or perhaps the stubborn animal that is not yet tired of surviving, pushed me to the door. I pressed my palm against the wood and felt the faint tremor of footsteps on the other side. No claws, no frantic battering, just the continual, patient padding that never needs to hurry. The city outside sounded like a congregation, not a mob. Their words threaded together, names, dates, fragments of recipes, snatches of old insults, a chorus that had scavenged memory as if it were treasure. Come to us. It ran through my head like a verse I could not shake. For the first time since the house became a sanctuary, I noticed how the thought of stepping outside felt like stepping into an old home, the ache of a memory, warm and dangerous. I saw in my mind the circle I had watched from the roof, bodies arranged like chairs in a hall. I imagined an object in the center, whatever dark relic they kept there, and a space carved for me, as if I were expected to sit down at a table set years ago. That night I dreamed I walked to the middle of that ring. The dream was slow and ordinary, like the best lies. The dead parted like curtains. They smiled in my dream, not grotesque smiles, but small, human smiles that suggested someone remembered my favorite joke. My brother stood among them untouched, not rotted, hair in his usual mess, hand outstretched. "Danny," he said, "come home." I reached for him and woke with my fingers curled around nothing. I woke again an hour later, and my body had betrayed me. The mattress dented as if I had stood, and I was sitting at the foot of the bed with the lamp still burning and the rope in my lap. How long had I been standing? Did I sleepwalk? Did the dead walk me in my dreams? The idea that I could be controlled like that made bile sour my throat. The lighter moments in my mind, the rational ones, offered explanations. Fatigue, malnutrition, a brain starved of novelty and nutrients conjuring faces like a fever. The cruel, persuasive moments in my chest whispered other things. The dead are learning to speak. They are rehearsing. The sentence was not for me but through me. It was a bridge. I checked the street. I had started carrying the crowbar across my knees like a talisman, and tonight my hands cramped around it. The following was there, as it always had been, at a polite distance. But something was different now. They gathered not in a wandering line but oriented like antennae toward a single block, a single intersection I had passed only twice before. They moved with intent. Their heads cocked, and one of them held a small sign, scraped cardboard with letters formed from what looked like old tape. From far away I couldn't read it, but the shape of it, squared, centered, felt like a map marker. I stayed behind a dumpster and watched while the city practiced patience. They would not advance on the building where I had been sheltering. They did not need to. They had a destination and they were steady toward it, whispering my name and then that new sentence as if to confirm the address. Come to us. The sign-bearer turned toward me for a heartbeat, and the mouth parted. No sound at all, and yet the meaning of it smacked against my skull like a hand. They knew where I had been, where I slept, where I hid. The city had become a compass calibrated to me. On the way back to my building, under a sky that looked like damp newspaper, I found something else. Tucked into the crook of a rusted lamp post, fluttering in a faint breeze, was a scrap of fabric the color of old tea. I almost missed it. I almost walked by and pretended not to care. The scrap was the size of my palm, and sewn into it, with ridiculous childishness, were the letters DAN. The stitching was uneven, like a child had learned to sew in secret. I picked it up, and the fabric smelled of rain and someone's breath. I put it in my pocket, and the weight of it felt like a promise. That night the whisper came again, not spoken but soldered into thought. We are putting pieces back together. It was not a voice I could point to. It was a feeling that settled into my ribs like a stone. At the same time, an undercurrent of anger braided through the chorus, as if someone or something were annoyed at my reticence. They're getting better at sentences. That terrifies me more than any claw or bite. A bite is simple, you can run from it. A sentence finds your holes and fills them with meaning. They use words like stitches, and the more they sew, the more the fabric of my resistance frays. I tried to resist. I forced myself to eat a can of beans, to drink a mouthful of water, to stand in the lamplight and read until the letters stopped swimming. Each time my mind threatened to slip, I scribbled on the margins of this book, "Don't go. Stay. Remember the screams. Remember the fire. The margin notes multiplied like lichens, tiny urgent fossils of my insistence that I could still refuse. And yet the pull grows. The scratched door, the rooftop circle, the sign-bearer with his taped cardboard, these are not isolated rituals. They are a campaign, slow and patient. They don't need to break me open with force. They merely need me to open the latch myself. When I put the scraps together in the lamplight, the 3 letters made a tiny constellation I could not unsee. They were not a threat. They were an address. Each stitched letter felt like someone had been in my room and arranged my life as if it were a map they could follow. Whoever made that scrap, someone with hands that could sew, or a dead mimic with a memory, had been close enough to touch my things. In the middle of the night, the whispering coalesced into another sentence, this one softer than the first, half threat and half solace. There is still room. The last word clung to me like a benediction. I write this with my hand shaking, because I can feel my resolve softening like clay. I see a path paved with the small, ordinary things I miss. My brother's laugh, the smell of coffee on a slow morning, the bench by the river where sunlight used to land like applause. The dead press those memories at me the same way a dealer shows a needle and says, "One more time." Tomorrow I have a plan that feels ridiculous and brittle. I will travel to the intersection they orient toward. I will watch from the shadows and not answer. I will see what they do when they have their circle without me. I am writing it, so I cannot later pretend I never intended anything. I need proof that I tried. But if I am honest, brutally, painfully honest, I know the truth taking shape in my throat, that the sentence is not meant to be resisted forever. It is meant to be accepted or failed at. The dead are practicing language, and language is a way of belonging. They are offering me belonging in exchange for a surrender I cannot yet admit I hunger for. I will try to stay away. I will try to be brave. But tonight, the whisper folded into the quiet of the room like a sleeping animal and purred my name. It added one last soft clause that I cannot pretend not to hear. Come to us, come home. If this is the end of my story, then let it be recorded here. If it is not, then let the paper be a lifeline. Either way, the sentence is already in motion. I left at dawn. I packed like a man who believed movement could dislodge fate. The crowbar, the coil of rope, a small canteen that tasted faintly of rust, 3 cans of the beans I'd stolen, my notebook, the pen I've worn down to a stub. I wrapped the plaid scrap, my brother's shirt, around my wrist like a bandage. It felt obscene and holy at once. I hesitated at the door, the same door that had been scored and kissed by whatever presses at the other side. For a second I thought about all the ways I could stay. Bolt the door, build higher barricades, dig in. Then the thought of that circle, the way they arranged themselves like they were marking out a space on the map of the city, abridged the rest of the sentence for me. I cannot be catalogued. I cannot be the artifact at the middle of their museum. So I left. The street swallowed my first steps. The sound of my boots was loud to the point of cruelty. At first there was nothing but the usual ruin. Cars like rib cages, newspapers tacked to light poles like memorial flags, a single shopping cart rolling slowly in the wind. I kept my head down and moved faster than I felt safe doing, as if speed might be a kind of armor. They found me before the block turned. I noticed them as a shadow at the corner of my vision, a form leaning in the doorway of a shuttered pharmacy. Then another on the stoop of an old bodega. Then, impossibly, a line tracing my path at a distance, like the city had decided to escort me. They didn't run. They never run. They walked in the way a tide walks toward a beach, relentless, patient, indifferent to whatever small obstacles lie in its path. But they were moving with the intention of a hunt. Only it wasn't a hunt in the old sense. There was no lurching, no fevered scramble. They moved as if dragged by a rope tied to the back of their skulls. Their heads were tilted toward me. Their hollowed eyes held the fixed focus of something that remembers a single fact over and over. Some clutched small objects, an empty bottle, a child's toy, a piece of paper, things that looked like tokens. They were following me. Behind them the city made a slow sound, whispering, distant and then near. My name rolled across the buildings like a hymn, soft at first, and then swelling into a chorus that made my teeth ache. "Daniel," it breathed. I turned and shouted for the first time in months. "Go away!" I yelled, throat raw, voice cracking in the open air like an old hinge. "Leave me! Leave me alone!" They did not answer with violence. They answered with their voice, the same voice that has threaded through every night since this began. The one that knows the shape of my name. Daniel. It was not a threat. It was not hunger. It was acknowledgement. My knees buckled. I doubled over, hand on my mouth to muffle the noise that wanted to leave me. A little boy, no older than 7, skin gone pale and hair thin as straw, stepped closer than the others. The skin on his cheek peeled away in a single grotesque strip, but his eyes were bright with some ridiculous, childlike curiosity. He tilted his head. "Daniel," he said so quietly I almost did not hear it. When I moved again, the line behind him moved too. The street had become a river, and I was its stone, and everything flowed around me. Every shadow seemed to hold a face, and every face shaped my name like it was the only prayer it had left. I tried to outrun them. I thought speed would fray the connection, but they kept pace at whatever distance I chose. If I cut across an alley, the alley filled. If I ducked into a courtyard, the courtyard answered with more bodies. There were breaks now and then, a scattered bench, a staircase with a broken railing, but the space between the dead flowed and tightened like breath. They did not attempt to grab me. They did not attack. They mirrored, they shadowed, they echoed. At some point, exhausted and shaking, I stopped in the doorway of an old church whose steeple had already fallen. I pressed my back to the stone and felt it hum through my shoulders, a low resonance that matched the whispering in my skull. The sun, clouded and weak, peeked through like an apology. I pulled the plaid scrap tighter and listened. They were not a wall. They were not a chorus of enemies. They were something else, a following, an entourage of memory. The voices threaded through me, mixing with my own thoughts until I could not tell the origin. When they spoke, they didn't say come. They said softer things. "We remember. We're here. You were here." Statements that applied no pressure, but unfurled inevitability like fog. I asked them silently like an absurd prayer. "Who sent you? What do you want?" The only reply was my name and the soft, patient cadence of the child's voice. When I finally moved again, it was with the weary acceptance of someone who has fretted over details while the house burns. I walked and they followed, a procession that kept its distance like a respectful crowd. At a crosswalk, an old woman with a shawl that was mostly teeth and bone held a tin cup and mouthed words I could not catch. A man in a delivery uniform, his jacket hanging off him like driftwood, repeated my name as if it were a ledger entry. By the time twilight rolled and I had crossed 3 neighborhoods, the city had a way of folding itself into new shapes depending on which street I took. I found a building with boarded windows and a roofline high enough to give me a vantage point. I climbed and collapsed into a corner, every muscle trembling as if I'd run a marathon. The following stopped at the sidewalk, forming a ring of figures that stared up at the roof in veneration. From that height, I could see their faces better. Not that they were less monstrous, rotted cheeks, missing jaws, half-lidded eyes like fish, but in their expressions there was something almost human. A slant of recognition, the curve of a smile half-remembered. I felt watched, certainly, but also observed like one might observe a photograph, with curiosity more than malice. I don't know what they want still. Each night I think I have an answer, and the next day the question expands like a leak. Part of me believes they are driven by some broken echo of community, a compulsion to gather around what's left. Another, darker shard inside me whispers that they are rehearsing roles, and that I am their final actor. As I write this now, the whispering is softer, but it presses. They are below, cataloging whatever remnants they can find, and every now and then a voice will rise clear enough to slice through the static. Daniel. Not a call, not a command. A fact. Tomorrow I will move again. I don't know where I'm going. I only know they will follow. And with each step I take, the feeling grows. This is no longer simply about escaping a horde that eats. This is about not answering to a chorus that remembers me better than I remember myself.